Alright, this will be just a quick demonstration on how to create fake shadows in Photoshop. So I've got this image of a camel and I want to put it on this background here. So I went ahead and made a selection first because this guy's camel is all pimped out with these tassels and everything. I didn't want to bore you with actually making the selection, but I just went and used the lasso tool with the option key held down and just kind of traced around everything. I don't like to mess around with too many of the other techniques because this way I just know that the selection is correct. But once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and load the selection. So I can either go up to select, load selection, and load alpha 1, or you can just command click on the thumbnail for that alpha channel. And I'm going to copy him and paste him right there into this image. I'll probably have to shrink him down just a little bit, make it fit the photo better. Okay, so once I have that, then what I'm going to do is create a new layer. Oh, and by the way, sometimes, depending on the lighting situation, if it's just studio lighting where it's evenly lit from all sides and you just want kind of a soft pooled shadow underneath, you don't have to go through all the stuff that I'm about to go through. A lot of times you can just take the lasso tool and just make kind of an odd shape and create a layer, fill it with black. I'll just do that now. Add a blur to it at whatever size looks okay, and then just turn the opacity down. Like I said, if it's just a studio lighting situation, sometimes that will suffice for a shadow. But because this is direct, bright sunlight, what I need is more of a harder edge shadow. So I'm going to, first of all, create a new layer. And just a quick tip, if you hold down the command key and then click on the new layer icon at the bottom of the layers palette, it will create a layer underneath the one that you're on currently, which is where I want this new layer to be. So what I'm going to do is hold down the command key and click on the thumbnail for the layer that has the camel on it. That should load the layer transparency. And then, making sure that you are on the blank layer that you created, do an option delete to fill with black. Double check that you're on your default color so that black is the foreground color. Otherwise you'll get some other color filled in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just deselect. So now I've got one layer that's just filled with solid black, and it's underneath the layer with the image on it. And I'll go into Edit, Transform, Distort, and I'll try grabbing just the top middle handle here and just dragging that shadow wherever I want it to go. And you always want to make sure that a cast shadow like this touches the places it's supposed to touch, meaning it should touch the camel's feet, like that. Once we blur this, it doesn't have to be perfect. This has to be somewhat close. And then I will just hit return to accept that. Alright, now I could just blur this, do another Gaussian blur, and call it a day. But just for the sake of showing you something different, I'm going to go to the background layer, and I'm going to do a select all and copy. And then I'm going to create a new file, and just hit OK, and paste that image in there. And then I will flatten it. And I'm going to convert it to grayscale. So image mode grayscale. And then just for the sake of adding some more contrast to this, I'm going to actually go into brightness and contrast and just bump up the brightness a little bit and the contrast a little bit, because I want some brighter whites on the tips of the sand and then some darker grooves in there. And I'll hit OK, and I'll save that. I'm just going to call it bump dot. I'll save that as a Photoshop file actually. Alright, now if I go back into this dunes image, if I click on the layer that has my shadow in it, I can go into, I'm just going to zoom in on the shadow so you can see this better. I'll go into Filter, Distort, and Displace. And you may want to play around with these settings. The higher the setting, the more it's going to displace it. But depending on the image that you're using as your source, I'm going to try the defaults first and we'll see where that goes. So I'll hit OK. Find that image that I saved and hit open. You can see what it does there. It basically uses the highlights and shadows of the source image to distort my shadow, so it kind of follows the ridges. If that was maybe a little too much, I can go back in there and do Displace and try to turn that down a little bit, so it's maybe a little bit more subtle. And then you're going to notice there's going to be some pixelizing along the shadow, probably depending on your background image. But once I do the Gaussian blur on that, turn that down a bit, about like that, and hit OK. And then I'll probably just turn the opacity down just a little, and you get something like that.